There is a stretch of road in the Ukrainian Carpathians where your phone loses signal, your radio turns to static, and even the GPS begins to hesitate. Locals say that's where the forest begins to listen. I hadn't been back in 15 years. Not since my grandfather disappeared. Officially, he wandered into the woods and never returned. Unofficially, nobody in the village wanted to speak about it. When my mother called and told me the old house was finally mine, I told myself I would only stay one night. Just long enough to sign papers, clear out a few belongings, and leave. The bus driver refused to go past the last stop. "You walk from here," he said. "It's only 3 kilometers." The road ahead was empty. No cars. No wind. Even the trees seemed unnaturally still. By the time I reached the village, dusk had swallowed the mountains. And something about the place paused. Not abandoned. Paused. The house stood exactly as I remembered it, wooden, dark, leaning slightly toward the forest as if listening for something. The windows reflected the sky like blind eyes. When I pushed the gate open, it didn't creak. It didn't make any sound at all. Inside, the air smelled of dust and dried herbs. My grandmother used to hang bundles of wormwood above the doorways, to keep things out. I used to laugh at that. Now, I wasn't laughing. The kitchen table was set for one. A plate. A glass. A spoon. I stood there for a long time, staring. No one had lived here for years. And yet, the spoon was still warm. At exactly 3:17 a.m., I woke up. Not because of noise. Because the silence had changed. The kind of silence that feels like someone is holding their breath. I lay there, staring at the ceiling. Then I heard it. A single footstep. Outside my bedroom door. Slow. Deliberate. Barefoot. I held my breath. Another step. Then another. It circled the bed. I could hear the boards bending under weight. But I saw nothing. The room was empty. Except for the mirror across from me. And in it. There was a shadow standing behind my bed. In the morning, I searched through old drawers. I found my grandfather's journal. The last entry was dated the day he vanished. It read, "The forest does not forget. It calls the blood back. If he returns, do not let him answer." Answer what? There was no explanation. Just that sentence repeated 3 times. And scratched beneath it, "It knows his name." I walked through the village that afternoon. No dogs barked. No birds moved. The wells were covered. The doors shut. Curtains drawn. It felt staged. Like a memory someone recreated poorly. And then I noticed something impossible. There were no tracks in the dirt roads. None. As if no one had walked here in years. Except for one set. Mine. That night, I didn't close the curtains. I wanted to see it if it came. At 3:17 a.m., the forest began to move. Not with wind. With intention. Branches bent inward, as if the trees were leaning closer to the house. The darkness between them thickened, becoming less like shadow and more like something physical. Then I heard it. My name. Whispered once. Then again. Not from outside. From everywhere. From the walls. From the floor. From inside my chest. I ran outside without thinking. The air was colder than before, sharp enough to burn my lungs. The trees stood perfectly still again, but directly in front of me, in the snow, was a circle. Pressed into the ground. As if something heavy had stood there. Waiting. The next morning, I followed an instinct I didn't recognize as my own. My feet carried me toward the forest path I hadn't walked since childhood. I remembered my grandfather taking me there once. I remembered him stopping suddenly, kneeling down, and whispering, never answer when it calls you from behind. At the time, I thought he was joking. The path led to a clearing. In the center stood an ancient oak tree, split down the middle by lightning long ago. Inside the hollow trunk were carvings. Names. Generations of them. Family names. And at the very bottom. Mine. Carved deep. Carved years ago. The bark was scarred around it, as if someone had tried to scratch it out. But it remained. I stumbled backward. "I've never been here," I whispered. But the forest responded with silence so dense it felt like pressure in my ears. And then something shifted inside my mind. A memory. Not from 15 years ago. From before that. Running between trees at night. Laughing. Bare feet against cold earth. Looking back at the house from the forest's edge. Watching someone inside the window. Watching myself. The realization came slowly. I didn't remember my grandfather disappearing. I remembered following him. I ran back to the house and opened the journal again. There were pages stuck together. Pages I hadn't noticed before. I peeled them apart. Underneath was a final entry, written in a different hand. Not my grandfather's. It said, "He returned at 7. The forest let him walk back." But it kept the original. My hands began to shake. I searched for childhood photographs in the house. In every picture before age 7. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't looking at the camera. I was looking past it. Toward the trees. As if someone was calling me home. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again. "Show me," I whispered. For a moment, nothing changed. Then my reflection stepped backward. I didn't move. It kept stepping back until it was no longer inside the room. It stood outside. In the forest. And I was still here. Inside the house. The reflection tilted its head and smiled. It looked older. Thinner. Its eyes were darker. Hungry. And then I understood. When I was 7, I got lost in the woods for 3 hours. They found me standing at the forest edge, silent. I told everyone I couldn't remember what happened. That wasn't true. I remembered something calling my name. And I answered. The forest doesn't take you. It replaces you. The thing that came back with my family that day wasn't me. It was something wearing my face. Something that needed time to grow. Time to learn. Time to wait. And when my grandfather realized it, he tried to bring the real me back. That's why he disappeared. Not lost. Not dead. Trapped. In the forest. Where the original waits. At 3:17 a.m., the knocking returned. This time, it came from the front door. I walked toward it slowly. Each step felt wrong. Like gravity had shifted. The door opened by itself. Outside stood a man. He looked like me. But younger. 7 years old. Barefoot. Silent. His eyes were human. Terrified. He whispered, "You weren't supposed to stay this long." Behind him, the trees leaned inward again. Watching. Waiting. I looked down at my hands. They were longer. Thinner. The skin slightly gray. I could hear breathing. Not outside. Inside me. And then I realized the worst part. I don't want to leave. The house feels natural. The forest feels like memory. And the boy at the door. He feels like a stranger, because the forest did not keep the original. It grew him. And sent him back. To replace the thing that replaced him. The cycle doesn't end. It corrects itself. The boy stepped inside. The forest grew quiet. And as my vision began to blur, I heard the whisper one last time, the forest remembers your name. And it will always bring you home.